Hello, welcome to Saturday Service, a podcast all about faith and football with me, Graham Boozy, in association with the Livestreams churches here in sunny Southend-on-Sea, England. And today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Mr Stu Alleway. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, my man. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Just to begin with, would you mind just giving a general introduction to yourself?
Yes, my name's Stu Alleway. I have been a Christian probably coming up 20 years. I have, for the last, I think it's 12 years, have served as chaplain at Southend United, which has had immense highs and lows. I'm based in Chelmsford, and my wife and I together run a charity called Big Love. So that's keeping us pretty busy at the moment.
So just to start off with, just a little general chat about football. I can see you're representing your colours, so we'll get on to that. But just initially, creature of habit, I always like to hear about people's origin story with football. What was it that first grabbed you about the game?
Do you know what? I think it was my dad took me to my first game in 1987. It was Chelsea against Southampton at the old, well, it was Stamford Bridge, but obviously nothing like it is today. And I fell in love with Kerry Dixon, who was just the most incredible striker for Chelsea. There was Tony DeRigo on the left wing, Clive Wilson. I was just captured from that moment. And because my dad was a police officer, we used to get into Stamford Bridge. He used to be able to chuck me over the turnstiles. So I'd go in for free. My dad would pay. And it used to be a regular thing me and my dad would do weekly. So I would see all of the games. I saw us win the old Division 2 title when Graham Roberts was captain. Dave Besant was my hero. So I've just been kind of stuck to Chelsea ever since then, and obviously world champions at the moment for the next 3 years, Graham. So I've still got bragging rights over me mates.
Absolutely. An interesting bit of circularity. Kerry Dixon played in the first game I ever saw. I believe he was. I'm sure he was playing for Luton Town at that point.
Yeah, that's right, Luton Town.
Yeah, and my first game was Southend Luton. So not that interesting. I just thought I'd mention it. But is there any moments that stick out from your time supporting Chelsea that you look back on with particular fondness?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be 2012, Munich. I was away at a men's weekend, would you believe it? Like, you couldn't have planned it. So it was, I had to excuse myself from the men's weekend so I could watch the football. And, you know, Munich score, I think in the 82nd minute, I think it was Thomas Müller. And my heart was just like breaking because I was in Malta when Chelsea played Man United in 2008. And I'm like, this is going to happen all over again. And then obviously Drogba turns up, does his magic, and the rest is history. But there was that, I would say, obviously, 2020, Thomas Tuchel and Chelsea. I still think it's an outrage that Thomas Tuchel was sacked. Those are two moments. Obviously, Jose Mourinho. Do you know what? For my wedding, when I got married in 2005, all the tables were named after Chelsea players. That was the only thing my wife would let me have that was Chelsea related. So, yeah, I mean, when Ruud Gullit signed for us, Luca Vialli, they were good times. I remember being 16, cycling home from school, hearing that Vialli had just signed for Chelsea, and just being ecstatic and just fond memories. Like I love being a supporter, obviously now, but I have fond memories of, like when I was at school and you had Dennis Wise, Dan Petrescu, Ed De Hoy, all of these guys that just framed my childhood. So yeah, there's lots of moments that stand out.
Dare I ask about the current regime? How are you feeling about them?
Yeah, I haven't got much positive to say about the current regime. I'm hoping that now that we've got the legend that is Xabi Alonso in charge and as manager, things may change, but I think they've still got a long way to build bridges with the fans. A lot of the stuff, don't massively understand what they're doing or why they're doing it, but you know what? That's down to them. I'm sure they'll get it right. Please, God.
I believe the young uns call it streets won't forget footballers, but you mentioned a number of players there, but is there a particular player that is so enigmatic to you that you think, okay, here's the guy?
Do you know what? For me, honestly, Roberto Baggio. I think the 1990 World Cup was my first experience of a World Cup, really. And I just fell in love with this guy. I mean, there was Gascoigne, obviously, but Baggio was I just loved the guy. There was him, Paolo Maldini, and Lothar Matthäus. Those three guys, I remember just following their careers, and I was always desperate that Chelsea would sign Maldini. But Baggio, I mean, my gosh, that guy, he was just special. And Gianfranco Zola, got to get my Chelsea guy in there.
Was that your first World Cup then, Italia 90?
That's the one I remember. So I was born in 82. So I think you had Mexico in 86. So I would have been 3 or 4. And then 90 was the one where I just think, oh my gosh, I just fell in love with international football. What a team. Bobby Robson, Gaza, Lineker, all those guys. Yeah, it was the first one I fondly remember.
Because it's such a romantic and evocative World Cup, isn't it?
Oh, it was incredible.
I don't remember it at all. It's bizarre because I was six by then. But yeah, no, the first one I remember is USA '94.
Yeah, okay.
And speaking of the World Cup, just wanted to get your views on it so far as we are recording it in the midst. It'll come out later, but lots of displays of Christian faith as well. It's been quite encouraging.
It really has, hasn't it? I love when people feel that they can freely express what's important to them. And for a lot of these players, faith is central to who they are. I mean, I was looking at, when Cody Gakpo tragically lost his child, but still giving honour to God. And I think it's an important part of people's lives. They want to express their faith. And I think it's been amazing to see those statements. I mean, the World Cup itself, I think, has been incredible. I think it obviously has been tarnished by FIFA and the president having their own private conversation. I mean, I'm interested to know why Kwanzaa has got a 2-game ban that can't be overturned. But it's that sort of thing that stinks. Like the football itself, brilliant, but it's just, I don't think people have much regard for the integrity of FIFA, unfortunately.
No, I agree. I think there's been a real dereliction of the game's sort of founding principles over the years. And I think we could probably talk at great length about that. So
Yeah.
I won't bore you too much with that. Just a quick question about playing football. I noticed from even your primary school days, you were an aspiring shot stopper. I was just wondering, did you play football much?
Yeah, do you know what I did? So I used to play in goal for a little bit. And then I used to complete opposite. I went and played up front. And the problem was, Graham, I was just lazy. I just didn't really like running. But I did, yeah, I played all the way up until I was about 20. But then I had a double leg break. And then before that, I'd broken my ankle. So listen, I was nothing special and I was never going to make it. I just loved playing it and had a good group of mates that I played with. And so, yeah, it was just good fun. But sadly now, I do football with my kids and the schools that I go into. But I recently had an operation, so I've got a metal big toe. So I have to make sure that I don't get stamped on these days.
Right. So maybe best just to watch from the sides, I think.
Yeah, yeah, you'd think, but there's just something in you that's like, you know what? I can still do something.
It can't hurt, famous last words.
Yeah.
If it's okay with you to move on to your personal journey of faith. You mentioned you've been a Christian for about 20 years, which obviously suggests that it's not something you were necessarily brought up within.
Yeah, so my parents were Christians, and so we would go to church on a Sunday. But the truth is, I just never was interested. It coincided with football on Sundays. I didn't really think church was for me. So from about 11 all the way through to about 20, I was out with my mates at the weekend, football Saturday, Sunday. And honestly, I just didn't see the relevance of church. I'd always had a belief in God, and I had no issue with people that had a belief or didn't. I just kind of cruised along, and I certainly never doubted the existence of Jesus. I was always fascinated, but I couldn't make the connection. And I just kind of thought, the Bible was this 2,000-year-old story. And if it works for people, great. If not, then let's just try and be nice and kind to each other. But yeah, I found faith for myself at about 21. And so that was a kind of story in itself. I was out with my mates in a bar in Chelmsford, and I was with a friend at the time, and she put a packet of cocaine in my back pocket, and I'd been dabbling in it, and I loved it. It gave you this euphoric high, and at the time, I just was questioning my life decisions. What am I doing? Where am I going? What does hope look like? And I would find that for 15 minutes, I didn't have to worry about anything because I was high. But I took myself off to a toilet in one of the bars and did what I did. And I came out and there was a bouncer. And the bouncer said to me, he said, I know exactly what you've done. You need to go downstairs so that we can sort this out. And I remember thinking, well, do you know what? I can outrun this guy. There's no way he's going to be able to catch me. But as I was walking down the stairs, they had about 4 or 5 bouncers on the door. And so I was like, yeah, this could be quite awkward. And I remember in my heart saying, God, I have messed this up big time. I don't know what's going to happen, but can you help me? And I remember my dad, like I said, was a police officer. So I knew that if you were caught with drugs, there usually tended to be a drug raid. And my dad had always been very clear, like if there was ever anything that came to our house, we would be in trouble, basically. So I had all of these things going on in my mind. And as I was speaking to the bouncers, he said, look, you've got 2 options. He said, you can give us what you have taken, or we will call the police. And so I gave them the little sachet that I had. And the guy said to me, he said, look, he said, you're not coming in here again. And I was like, do you know what? Wow. Like the police could have come, there could have been a whole big thing. And I just remember thinking, God, I don't want to live my life like this. I don't want to be someone that's reliant on something else that is kind of winging my way through life. Like I want to find a purpose and I want to find what it is that I'm called to. And the next day I took myself off to church because I felt that's what I should have done. And I turned up to church a little bit worse for wear. And I remember sitting in the service thinking, oh, what have I done? Like, this is boring. And so I left church really disappointed because I thought, oh, I'm going to hear God speak to me this morning and everything's going to change and be better. But throughout the day, I had this nagging feeling of like, go back to church this evening. And I would never go to church twice on a Sunday. But I went along and I put myself at the back of the church and I found out it was a praise and worship night. And if I'd have known it was a praise and worship night, I would never have gone. And I just remember sitting there thinking, I've got this all wrong. And maybe it was because I was intoxicated that I was having these voices in my head saying, you need to go to church and God is real. And I just remember feeling this overwhelming sadness. But a few minutes later, this lady comes and approaches me. And this lady now happens to be my wife. But she said, look, I know you're on your own. She was the youth pastor at the time. She said, why don't you come and sit with the youth and just not be on your own? And as she was walking towards me, everything inside me was like, please walk past me. I don't want to talk to anyone. But I weirdly said yes. So I went and sat with the youth and Graham, I can't explain it. It wasn't like this divine supernatural thunderbolt moment, but I just remember feeling just this weight had lifted and this peace and this sense of I'm not alone. And so I stopped drinking. I stopped doing drugs. I got involved with the youth, had my own encounter with Jesus and decided to get baptized, did a year Bible college and then got married. So it was quite a quick season, but overwhelmingly grateful that Jesus doesn't give up on us. And even at our lowest points, he's not absent.
Are you able to speak of a particular period of time, aside from what you've just discussed with us, about where your faith sort of sustained you, perhaps in other sort of challenging circumstances?
So I'm really happy to share this. So probably about 3 years ago, doctor thought I had PTSD and I was quite obviously depressed and really struggling. And so I'm still on antidepressants. I'm still seeing my counsellor, but there's this guy called a theologian, a guy called John Lennox. And if you YouTube him, he debates loads of people, but he has got this beautiful way of communicating and this beautiful faith that inspires and encourages. And he uses an analogy when he talks about Jesus and when people ask or question where God is in the midst of tough times. And he basically says it's not that God or Jesus is absent. Actually, if you look at the Gospels, Jesus effectively parachutes himself into the middle of people's pain and hurt. And I knew I wasn't functioning well. And I just remember having that picture of just Jesus parachuting in and standing alongside me, taking me on this journey of what it looked like to take meds. I felt incredible shame that I'm meant to be one of the pastors in my church. I'm doing stuff with Southend. I should have it all together. Yet here I am, just broken, tired and questioning why I'm here. And I just had this overwhelming sense of Jesus' peace and kindness. And I think one of the things that's beautiful about God and what I've learned more about him is that sometimes and I know I'm like this, I want the audible voice of God. I want something so obvious. But actually, I think it's in the still small voice and God using people to demonstrate his love, his closeness, his kindness. So I guess the big thing is I've been overwhelmed by people's kindness and people's closeness and people checking in and wanting to walk this journey with you so you don't feel alone. And so I feel like God has massively been close. I mean, a lot of the stuff was triggered by some of the stuff that was happening in our family and just not knowing the outcome of what things were going to be. But, by God's grace, we seem to be over some of that stuff. But it's certainly a period that I look back now and think, yeah, I know God was in the middle of it all with me.
I think that's interesting because from a personal perspective, I've never had the lightning bolt moment either. I think for me, it's just a case of this feels right. and
Yeah.
this feels correct and this feels comfortable. And for me, that is the Holy Spirit moving through my life. I was once thinking out loud in my back garden, as I often sit out there and stare at the sky. I was thinking out loud about my purpose. And at that moment, a shooting star came across the sky, and that felt a little bit much. I was like, all right, mate, I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
No worries, a little bit over the top, but there you go. Can you talk to a little bit about your church that you attend and the role it plays within your life and how it shapes your decision making, perhaps as well?
So I go to a church called Skylark Church in Chelmsford, and for 11 years I was the community pastor there. So I was highly involved in working the community, working with the police, council, schools. And one of the things I love about my church is that it loves God, loves people, and it embraces people, it journeys with people, and I think demonstrates the message of Jesus in a beautiful way. I go in now to church as someone not involved with the church because of what I'm doing now, but going along feeling that, I'm welcome, I'm loved. My senior pastors, a couple called Pete and Nikki Sims, are just beautiful and lead incredibly well. But it's an embracing church that accepts people where they're at, journeys with them, and I just love seeing the church flourish. I think the local church is the hope of the world, and I think the local church can absolutely transform communities. So I would say Skylark Church is a huge part of my life. And like I said, although I'm not as involved as I was, to go along on Sundays and to hear stuff that the church is continually doing, it just fills me with real excitement. And, God's got it.
Still trying to decide if this is a good question or not. Favorite Bible quotes. I always ask people this, and it's kind of like they suddenly think, "Where's my?" I can't remember
Yeah.
any of the Bible
Yeah.
all of a sudden. So I'm just wondering for you.
Yeah. Do you know what? Psalm 18:32, and it's God will arm me with strength and make my path perfect. And I love that because so often I feel weak and insignificant, and the promise that He will arm me with the strength that I need, and no matter what the path ahead looks like, He knows what it's going to be. And so I've always held on to that, and it's a verse that I'll quite often share with mates or people to encourage them, because I just think it's such a powerful, strong verse that uplifts, encourages, and gives hope.
Beautifully put. Can you move on to your chaplaincy with Southend
Yeah,
United?
for sure.
So, how did that role come about? What facilitated your move into that area?
So really interesting. So I was fascinated by chaplaincy, and I always wanted to be involved in football. And I really love the concept of being someone behind the scenes that is not known to anyone outside of the club, but is known to the players as someone that they can trust, come alongside, and build relationship. And so I actually wrote a letter to all the local clubs, and Colchester United got back to me and said, "Come down, we'd love to have a chaplain, let's have a talk." And so I went down, and I think the manager, I think it was John Ward. So we're talking about 15 years ago, I think it was 14. And he'd had a brilliant experience of chaplaincy at Watford, and he wanted to incorporate it into Colchester. So he effectively appointed me there and then. And so I was like, wow, this is amazing. I'm excited. Colchester's down the A12, so it's easy to commute to. And then the following day, I get a phone call from John, and he said, "Look," he said, "I'm so sorry. We can't appoint you." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And he said, "The ownership doesn't think that faith and football is a good combination, and therefore we don't need you." And so I was gutted, but I was like, well, it is what it is. But I started to connect with Sport Chaplaincy UK and a brilliant guy called Matt Baker. And Matt told me about this postgrad in sport chaplaincy. And so I thought, well, if I do this, if I do go into chaplaincy at a later stage, then I'm better prepared, I have a bit more of understanding. So I did this course for a year. And after I finished, sport chaplaincy contacted me and said, "Look, Southend is available and they'd be interested in a chaplaincy. Would you be interested in doing a dual chaplaincy?" And the other guy that I was doing it with was this incredible guy called Mike Lodge, who was the Bishop of Southend, I think. So he was, a dad figure, an older guy than me, but I just loved time with him. And he just had this beautiful presence. And we would go in together, and every Thursday we'd go in with the players. It was when I think Phil Brown had just taken over. So obviously getting to know the players, and that in itself was a challenge because at that time I just turned 30. So, I wasn't an old boy. I wasn't what they would label as or look like a vicar. So it took a real while to get accepted. And the amount of times I would go in feeling awkward, feeling like I shouldn't be here, but just continuously plugging away each week, just showing up, being consistent, showing interest, stuff started to change. And the tipping point was when one of the players lost their nan and asked if I would take the funeral. And so took the funeral. And I don't know if he'd communicated with the other players, but from then I became accepted and I was included. And, I'd end up playing pool with the players, lunch, and started to develop deeper relationships where quite often I'd end up talking to players on the phone or meeting up with them. Because one of the things was when you're in a big group setting, if you're seen to be going off with the Rev or the Chaplain, there's automatic, what's wrong with him? What's going on in his world? Whereas football's it's a culture or an industry where people very much keep their issues and keep their personal problems to themselves. So I found that after I was accepted, a few players would text me, message, and we'd meet up. So yeah, it's been a beautiful experience.
What does a week look like for you? Did you just go in once a week, or did you go to match days as well? And did you have any involvement with the supporters?
Yeah, so I'd go in on the match days. I didn't go to as many as I'd have liked to, mainly because of young family and other commitments. But yeah, I was always in on a Thursday. I would occasionally go in a couple of times a week, maybe when we were heading up to the playoffs or there was important stuff going on, just to be that presence. But it was, like I said, it was just an incredible experience, Graham. And just what's really interesting with some of these guys is, so I was there when we had a penalty, and you'd have people in the terraces like just abusing these players. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, but you don't know that earlier this week his partner had a miscarriage. Or I was with one player whose mum had sadly passed away, and he was all over the place. And you're like, nah, that's not cool. Like, but football becomes this Saturday tribal thing, doesn't it? When, you want the best for your team, you want your team to win. And sometimes we forget there's a human that is very much walking through issues that are heartbreaking and tough. And the last thing that they need is someone to carry on that abuse.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because I think there's a real sort of tightrope, I feel, between football and spirituality. Football's all about ruthlessness. It's all about winning. It's all about
Yeah.
having this mentality that we're going to bury the other team.
Yeah.
This is how you win. And where does Christianity slot into that?
Do you know what? One of the things that I've learned from being at Southend, and bearing in mind that Southend are now conference, it was when we were in the playoffs with Phil Brown to go up to League One. And there was a player that had a falling out with him, and he effectively had his contract terminated. And he's 32, and he comes and talks to me, and he's like, I don't know what to do. I've got a mortgage, I've got a family. And one of the things that I think is something that we carry, and if we truly believe this, I think can transform others. But as a Christian, believing that, do you know what? I believe that the Holy Spirit resides in me, and wherever I go, I take the presence of Jesus with me. And me as a human messes stuff up like we all do. But I think if we truly grasp that we carry this holy, beautiful presence in Jesus, then we can trust that when we're in those difficult situations where I was with this player, that, it's not that they always want to hear the right answers, and it's not that they just want to know that someone's there. And I think if we can carry that peace and that hope, and a lot of the time I don't know the answers, but just that sense of, but we carry that presence with us. And if we carry that presence, then where God is, there's peace, there's hope, there's joy. I think, whether you're in your workplace, your school, your college, whatever it is, if we truly grasp that, then we can bring our Christianity into different sectors without people feeling that they're being overwhelmed, Bible bashed, converted, whatever you want to call it. So I think there's a really beautiful, subtle way that we can bring this message of hope to people. And I found that with a lot of the footballers, it's just turning up, being present, loving well, and being available.
Because you touched upon it there, and it's another balance. How much of the role was pastoral and how much of the role was spiritual? And, I'm always nervous of sharing with certain people. I think about times when I should do it, maybe, and maybe not, but confidence is a little bit shaky at times. Obviously, if someone stubs their toe on something, it's not the time to chat about their Lord and Saviour. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You've
yeah,
got to find
100%.
your time. But yeah, I just wondered how much of, on balance, how much was pastoral and how much was spiritual.
So I always went with the assumption, look, they know I'm chaplain, therefore they know that I have a faith background. And if they want to talk faith, they know I'm there. So I felt that kind of helped me because then it took pressure off me to think I've got to go in to the club today and have X amount of conversations about Jesus. I always often just went in as myself and asked them how their day was going, how their family's doing, what's going on in their world. And there would be quite a few times there was no faith related questions, and that would happen for maybe a few weeks. And you know what? That's fine. Because like we've said earlier, like go in and be a presence. That's fine. And it's through consistency that people will then ask you questions. So a lot of it was pastoral support, checking in, making sure they're doing okay. But then there would be those deeper moments where a player would grab me on my own or say, can I speak to you after training's finished, and share something that's going on in their world. And you think, well, if you're sharing with me, then I'm going to share with you why I think Jesus is important in this situation. Or, I might not have the immediate answer to your question, but I will be praying for you. And prayer is a huge part of my life. Then I would follow it up with a text or a phone call. So yeah, I always try and take as much pressure off myself because, I'm not the one that saves people. And, that's Jesus's job, right? But if, like I said, we can build those relationships, if we can be kind to people, care for people, then I kind of have found that people are drawn to that. And as you build that consistent relationship, people will open up. I think it's really important that, the consistency, because who's going to open up to someone that is maybe in once a month or is inconsistent in their role? Like, I think the basics are you have to be consistent and you have to be interested. You have to be okay with being out of your comfort zone. And that's not a bad place to be. And trust that, God's got you there because he ordained it. He wants you there. So I think trying to, take pressure off thinking you've got to save anyone is pretty helpful.
So your tenure at Southend sort of coincided with a really, really challenging period for the club, a bit amongst,
Yeah.
transfer embargoes potentially being wound up. So many high court hearings. It was like,
Yeah.
it almost felt like on a weekly basis we were going to think, well, wait, is there going to be a club next week or year or whatever? And I just wondered, because you're obviously amongst it all, if you wouldn't mind sort of providing a bit of an insight into how everyone navigated through it, how the players dealt with potentially not being paid, how the manager dealt with having 12 first team players. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about that tumultuous period.
Yeah. And do you know what? I need to say, Kev Mayer is unbelievable. He is such a brilliant guy. And I really loved watching him, just the way that he'd engage, the way that he managed that embargo, losing players. I remember being in his office having a coffee where there was him, there was Mark Bentley and Darren Curry. And on his whiteboard was a depleted starting 11. There wasn't an 11. And looking at the way he managed those players, looking at the way he encouraged his staff, he would have felt the pressure. Without doubt, he's got players telling him they want to go because they've not been paid. And what do you do with that? You've got players rightly asking where their salary is. But he just led from a real example. And he just has this aura, this calm aura that, you know, he oozed that out. And listen, I know that they were stressed, and it was, some of the stuff was incredible to hear what was happening. But he kind of took it in his stride and worked with what he had. He knew it wasn't ideal. He knew that the club was in desperate trouble, as has been highlighted. But he never once gave up on those players, his backroom staff. And if anything, I think created this siege mentality of, it's us against the world. And do you know what? We can stick together and walk through this. Trust me. And who knows what it's going to look like, but let's do this together. And he was just top class, really, really top class. And like I said, with all the previous managers that I've worked with, there's been something that I've really loved about them. But I don't think any of them had it quite as bad as Kev.
Yeah, it's a shame to see him go, and I obviously wish Kieran Dyer
Yeah, for sure.
the biggest amount of luck. But yeah, I think it's sad that he's gone. But what do I know? I'm no expert for certain. Did you deal with any of the office staff whilst you were at Southend?
Yeah, I knew some of them, and there was some real beautiful people. Like who I really enjoyed time with. So one of them's I think moved on to Colchester. But yeah, my role was more with the first team, the reserves, the kids. So I would, some of the young players, like when they were released, it was a really important time to be available for them. I had kids in tears because they'd been released, and that's your whole world. You want to be a professional footballer, and it comes crashing down. Like I said, you're with the backroom staff who are going through their own stuff. So it's more than just the starting 11. There is all those backroom people that would just. I mean, I can't speak highly enough of them. Like, yeah, one of my favourites is it was a couple of guys, Steph Russo and Ben Clarkson, who would just. I would come in and they would just make it so beautiful for me. Like it was, oh, Rev, how you doing? And do you want to go and pray for this player who's on the treatment table? And, we'd have a bit of fun, but it was just a great role.
And can you just tell me a little bit about the FA Faith and Football series? I don't know if you went to Wembley Stadium for that, because I know the last one was at Wembley. Yeah, just if you did get to go to Wembley, what an opportunity. How was that for you?
Yeah, so I went to the one last year, 2025. So I went with a couple of guys from my church, and it was really good because I obviously got to meet some previous players that I'd worked with. You're hearing about the work that's taking place in football, where faith has a huge role to play. But it was just, seeing different workstations, different organizations that are doing stuff in the world of football. Yeah, it was class. And again, it's the things that you wouldn't know about that you think, oh, wow, there is this pastoral care system. There is these different forms that players can go to where they're looked after. So I think it was awesome. And obviously getting to sing, I think it was at Christmas time, so carols at Wembley, and yeah, it was a really good experience. But like I said, I love the opportunity to connect with previous players or people that I've come across working in football and just seeing how they're doing. So yeah, really important stuff.
Just want to move on to your work with Big Love, your charity, and the thing that is probably takes up most of your life these days. What inspired the creation of the charity? Was there a sort of particular instance or a set of circumstances that sort of drove you into doing this?
Yeah. So my son has just turned 18, but when he was 6, I took him on a mission trip with our church, and it was a football mission trip to Romania. And I went with the sole purpose of having time with my son and just exposing him to a different culture experience, not really thinking anything more than that. And the week that we were there, I had never seen poverty like it. Like I'd seen poverty, but not to the extent that I was witnessing. And, I was watching kids in bins, kids just scavenging. Like it really pulled on my heart. And I came back, and for a couple of weeks, I was just processing what I'd seen. And I said to my wife, look, I don't know what it is, but there's something here that I feel like as a family, we need to explore, see if God's saying something more. So she came the following year, and we took our 2 daughters. So they would have been 7, my son, and then my 2 daughters would have been 5 and 18 months. And we were walking on a dirt path, and I was holding my youngest's hand with my wife, and this kid jumps out of a skip and was just dirty, skinny, had dirty food in their hands. And we were just like, nah, God, what is it you are saying? And we felt God say, you can do something. And so we came back thinking, well, look, maybe we can partner with schools, churches, businesses, and look at creating forums where people can use their gifts and talents to serve children that are vulnerable to being trafficked, vulnerable to poverty, no education, and hunger. So fast forwarding it kind of like to where we are now, we work in partnership with an organisation called Outstretched Hands, where we resource kids centres, where kids are educated, fed, loved, equipped, and we have a farm. And that's a story in itself. But basically, the cows that we have, the milk and the cheese that gets sold, is what resources the kids centres. So our dream is to keep buying cows, so that the more cows we have, the more children that we can support and resource. So these centres are keeping kids safe from being trafficked. So we have a centre in an area that has the highest rate of child trafficking in southern Romania. We are making sure that young girls in particular are being skilled up so that they are less vulnerable to being prostituted. And again, trying to give boys skills so that they're not exposed to being trafficked. So we have that overseas element. And then locally here in Chelmsford and Essex, we run something called the Hope course, which is a course that we wrote a few years ago, which goes into a drug and alcohol centre where it's working with people that are walking through addiction. But it's a self-esteem course for 6 weeks. We pump them full of self-esteem, worth, value, purpose. So that takes place with adults. We're looking to launch that into businesses. We go into schools and do the big Hope course, which is similar to the Hope course, but it's getting kids ready for secondary school, dealing with peer pressure, social media, but again, wanting to instill that whole you've got worth, you've got purpose, and you're valuable. And then I do football. I go into secondary schools and work with young boys that might be close to being expelled or have low self-esteem. And we use football as a tool to, again, rebuild that. And then we go into special needs schools. So we do a lot locally. We've got a music course that the young people write their own song, again, about how amazing they are, how unique they are. And it's something that we really want young people to get across, or anyone that we work with, that you're seen, you're valued. And listen, whatever your story looks like now, there is a new side to the story that we believe can be better, that can be hope-filled. And for us as Christians, we would say, for us, it's God. But if us just coming alongside you helps you in this situation, then that's great as well. So yeah, we're really looking to grow our UK work, partner with churches, businesses. So yeah, there's these two kind of elements that we work through. So lots to be grateful for, but yeah, it certainly keeps us busy.
You identified football as one of your key sort of strategic areas. And I just wondered if you could speak a little as to how you use football as a vehicle to empower and increase confidence and hopefully turn people away from a life that's maybe going in the wrong direction.
So statistically, young boys are more likely to have a mobile phone than a dad living at home. And so what we try and do is, for an hour when I'm in one of the schools, I'm like, I'm going to be your dad for an hour. So I'm going to speak life into you. I'm going to challenge you when you need to be challenged, but I am going to encourage you, build you. And so in football, it's perfect for that, because you have to work as a team. Even Leo Messi, who is the greatest, he will tell you how important his team is, how the best still need people around them to build them up, to let them be the best that they can be. So we talk about the importance of what it looks like to be a good leader. What does it look like to look after your teammates? So you can apply that to, okay, what does it look like to look after members of my family? What can I learn from football that I can take to my family? Well, I can learn to encourage. If someone makes a mistake, and everyone makes a mistake in football, my first response isn't going to be to blast them with expletives. It's going to be, do you know what? Hey, head up, let's go again. And so trying to incorporate those kind of life skills that, you're going to get knocks and you're going to have hardship. But do you know what? You've still got purpose and you have worth and you have something to offer the world, even when stuff comes against you. And so it's very much saying to the boys, look, football is just one way of skilling you up to get you ready for the outside world. And we've seen some beautiful stories of that. I have a kid now who helps me on a Thursday with my year 8s who finished year 13, but I had worked with him from year 7 all the way through. So he now helps me on a Thursday. So he's one of those stories, one of those kids that, hasn't had it easy, but he is now installing those same principles into the guys that we now work with. So, I think football has many benefits to helping young people. Respect. What does it look like to respect the ref? Refs will make mistakes. Do they intentionally make mistakes? I don't think so. They may not have seen it. They may have just not been concentrating, but really, are we going to tell them to F off? Come on, let's deal with this properly and respectfully. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing with the football.
And I noticed there's a couple of donations of kit and equipment from teams like Chelmsford and Southend. And I think obviously from our end, we can go, oh, that's a nice thing to do. I just wondered if you could tell me what it's like for the other end to receive those and what that means to them.
Do you know what? So when we head to Romania, so that's where I take a lot of the kids. So we're working with kids in villages. We are working in areas where, there is no water or electricity. But football is a huge part of their world. You've got kids that they get a load of plastic bags, roll it up with sellotape, and then that's their football. So when we go over, we take footballs, we take football kits, we look to bring equipment where we can. And there is such gratitude. The kids are grateful. They are super grateful. It says in the Bible, doesn't it? It's better to give than to receive. And you see that, and you see the joy that it brings. and all I've done is given a football shirt. But this football shirt becomes so important to them. And there's been times when I go back year after year and you see the kids wearing the shirt that you gave them and they excitedly tell you about you giving it to them 3 or 4 years ago. So we try as often as we can to get kits out there, and you've got 6 or 7 year olds running around in adult tops, but they don't care. They love it. But it means so much to them, and they're not being wasted. The kits, they're used. The footballs all get used. It's just beautiful to see it all happen.
I do love the idea of the farm. I think it's a wonderful thing to do because you're not just sort of building something and leaving. It's creating this self-sustaining entity that people can find employment in and can also provide food and sustenance.
Like with any charity, you rely on donations, but we are acutely aware that we are in a cost of living crisis. We're aware that people are finding life very difficult. And so we've always tried to look for practical and creative ways where we don't have to fully rely on people. So when the farm came about, we got given a donation, and it's what allowed us to buy the cows. So we are hopeful that over time, the more cows that we get, we can then hopefully resource some of our UK work, look to, like I said earlier, try and protect as many kids as possible, whilst bringing opportunity to adults to learn maybe a skill on the farm, to learn about agriculture, to get apprenticeships to young lads and to get them working on our farm. So we've got this vision, and we work with some UK charities, one in particular called Reach Every Generation, which supports young people caught up in gangs or alternative provision. And so looking at taking children or young adults that are struggling in the UK school system or have got themselves into circumstances that wasn't of their choosing, and looking to get them over to Romania to work on the farm. I mean, we've already done stuff like this and it's been incredible, but just looking at opportunities where we can play people to their strengths, and particularly to show young people that, you know what, you have got an important role to play in serving and loving others. So yeah, the farm is hugely important. So our hope and dream, like I said, is more cows, the ability to do more for the kingdom, and hopefully honour God well.
In a sermon you did for the Skylark Church, which was about Jesus wept, that passage of the Bible, you spoke of some really challenging situations that you were confronted with. One of them was two orphan boys living alone in quite a dark, small, dingy apartment. Refugees from the Ukrainian conflict, sort of navigating their way through a particularly heavy day of bombing in Kyiv. And you were talked about how Jesus was sort of experienced distress by what was surrounding him, but you spoke of this hopeful glimpse of humanity. And I can go online and see the work that you do, but there's obviously going to be a lot of these situations that you encounter. And whilst it's 100% paramount that what to put front and center is the stories of the people that you're dealing with, and we can't even begin to imagine that level of suffering. So I know it's paramount to place that front and center. However, I just wondered, what is it that keeps you going through those confronting experiences and how you navigate them? Is it those glimpses of humanity that what drive you forward?
There's so much to that. When I was on the Ukraine border. It was 14 days into the war, and it was -15, and there was this ferry that was going back and forth, and there was this queue of cars. It was as far as you could see. And I remember this mum comes over, and she's got her pram and two kids, and she's walking over with just wrapped up in her coat. And there's this guy behind her. He's probably in his 60s, and he's holding his cat in a cage. That's all he had to bring over. And there was multiple stories of that. And it's tragic and it's heartbreaking. But what it reminded me of is, and I don't know, this might be a huge generalization, and but I genuinely think most people want to serve and be kind to others. I don't think everyone is, a nasty person. Like, obviously there is the exception. We hear those stuff, but generally speaking, I think people want the best for others and want to live in peace and want to live in kindness. And when I was on the border, all I saw was kindness. People offering blankets, people offering coaches to Bucharest, people that were offering to help with paperwork. Like, people wanted to help and come alongside people. And like I said earlier, like, so often we want the mighty God experience, like God to show up and to hear this audible voice of God. And And listen, that's all great stuff. And I'm sure it happens. But I think God uses people to show his love and to show his mercy and his grace. And I think he's put these gifts and things into all people. So whether you're a Christian or not, God has given you a gift and talent. And seeing people from all walks come together to serve and love people well, it was a truly humbling experience. When I was on the board, there was this huge section that was Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, listen, I'm not a Jehovah's Witness. I wouldn't subscribe to what they believe, but they were demonstrating love in abundance and how they would care for people. And it just made me think, like, humans, I think we're wired to care for people. And you see that with Jesus, like, he put himself in the middle of situations, in the middle of conflict, in the middle of sadness and grieving. Like, Jesus didn't shy away or hide away. He was actually fully present. And when it says he wept, he knew what he was going to do with Lazarus, but he lets the emotion hit him. He lets the situation that is overwhelming hit him. And it says he wept. And so what it says to me, that Jesus is in tune with his emotions. He's in tune with the situation. And I imagine Jesus being in the midst of being on the border as those people were coming in, cold, hungry, separated from loved ones. I think that's where Jesus is. Listen, I believe in the church. I said I believe it's the hope of the world. But I think Jesus is in all the places maybe we would find uncomfortable to go into or difficult. He didn't shy away. And I just think him weeping shows us how humane Jesus is. And to, like I said, go to the Ukraine, to be in a block of flats knowing that two young kids have been abused, horrific, absolutely horrific. And some of the stuff that we've seen and experienced as kids have been exploited in traffic, like, quite often my prayer is, God, where are you? Like, come on, this is unbelievable. But I just always come back to this sense of Jesus sees it and he's not okay with it, but he's not absent. And like I said, I don't have the answers to all of these things. Like this, it's a mystery and I don't understand a lot of it. And sometimes, like everyone else, I get angry and I get annoyed. But the fact Gospels and Scripture shows us Jesus never shied away and was never absent is what gives me real hope that he sees. And one day, Revelation says he will wipe away every tear and every pain, and it will all be restored and it will all be new. And, you know, I look forward to that day. But until then, there will always be this tension. But in that tension, choosing to believe that Jesus sees and he's present.
I could probably talk to you for about 2 days. However, that probably wouldn't upload to Spotify. So your reward for an hour in my company is called the very exciting any other business section. Could dress it up, but here we are. Anything else you would like to share? Do you have do you sell cheese from the farm? I don't know. Anything you can plug, please do so now.
Yeah, we do sell cheese in Romania. Unfortunately, I can't export it back to the UK. Just, yeah, bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I tell you what we would really love and value. One of the things that I'm always inspired by when I read the Bible is it's Solomon. And Solomon comes into power and God effectively says to him, and I'm paraphrasing, you can have anything you want. And so Solomon could have said, oh, do you know what? I'm going to have the biggest armies. I want all of this land. I want all of these ladies, the girls, the gold, the glory, everything. And he asked God, no, give me wisdom. And I think that's the thing that we crave as a charity, as Em and I lead it. Like, yes, we need resource. Yes, we need space. Yes, we need more schools to get on board. But actually, if we truly grasp God's wisdom, then all of the things that we need will follow. So I want to lead in a way that is wise, kind, compassionate, that is God-centered and God-focused. That's the thing I would plug. Like, if you think of us, pray for us. And let's see what God does. But as long as it's for his glory, then that's cool.
If you'd like to support Stu and Em's charity, you can head over to biglovecharity.com, or you can find them at Big Love Charity on Instagram and Facebook, or Big Love Charity 1 on X, as well as their YouTube and TikTok, something I need to sort out, but being a middle-aged man, TikTok terrifies me. You can also find me at Saturday Service Football on Instagram and Facebook, and at Faith and Footy on X. Head to livestreams.org.uk for more information about my church. Stu, it's been an honour and a pleasure to talk to you genuinely.
Mate, what a pleasure. Thank you for your time. And listen, keep doing what you're doing, my man. It's brilliant.
Well, likewise. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Bless you, bud. Take care of yourself.